Welcome back to day 2 of Apex. We've got 15 amazing I see a few hungover faces in the crowd. So hopefully you'll get through the 15. Yeah, we've had some phenomenal content so far, and I hope you're ready for some more.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. We're so excited to dig into day 2. And we'll start off by hearing from Bharath Chari. Bharath is a board member at the XRPL Foundation, and he'll be joining us virtually from Tallinn, Estonia. Bharath is going to discuss the work the foundation has been doing to support developers building on the XRPL.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. At the outset, I'd like to apologize for my voice. I have a sore throat today, so its timing is perfect on that. We've been operational for close to a year. We've registered for a year or so, but we've been really working at things probably since April or May this year. So we just want to give a brief overview of what's been in our pipeline and what's coming up. So these are core technically issues which we are tackling right now. The core code for the Ripple D is being moved to our GitHub. The process of renaming it to XRPLD will begin soon after. We already govern the xrpl.org domain with ample and lovely contributions from RippleX and other partners who continue to help us add, expand, and make it more usable for the entire ecosystem. We've published 2 UNL so far, and we're continuing to expand. As negative UNL comes into play, which it should within a month or so, we'll expand even more aggressively, which means that the network has more validators and it becomes more robust. We'd like to publish simple guidelines for validators starting to 2022. This applies to both entities as well as individuals. There'll be no preferences given to entities per se, but it's just that we want everybody to identify themselves. It's an issue of trust. On the infrastructure front, as most of you know, we operate the XRPLcluster.com, and we've been aggressively expanding the infrastructure for that. It's a global expansion. We are low latency everywhere, and we're really pleased that individuals from the ecosystem are now providing their bandwidth and their hardware for it. We thank them all for that. We're doing a lot of work in consumer protection, which means we do it at the middleware level. As we all know, the XRP ledger itself does not differentiate between transactions, but middleware can. And it's becoming more and more important that from a regulatory perspective, from a law enforcement perspective, that we provide forensics APIs to all exchanges and other providers for free. So this has been there, and right now we provide the basic level, but we feel that we should be able to provide a lot more going forward. After all, without protecting users of the XRPL, it's not really right. So we are going all out for that. An interesting thing is that some enterprise players, including some hardware wallets, have switched to xrplcluster.com for their query and submission requirements. Why do they do that? Because we ensure through some magic coding by Wietse and others that we are always the lowest fee. And that's very important because we don't want people to have to pay exorbitant fees because of load. On the non-technical parts, we've had some recent activities, and we're really happy to say that it happened actually in the beginning of Apex. Yesterday, I got information that we've been added to a list of vetted nonprofits in Estonia. You don't get added to this list unless there's a rigorous process which says that we have a vision, that we will carry out things, and we are good for economy, the society, and we have a plan, which is not for just this year, that a plan which goes forward. We're working with universities and schools to create scholarships in our name, right? We are being pretty focused on those interactions with them. We have our first partnership is with the leading technical institute called Taltech. We're giving scholarships for people with masters and PhD as well as baccalaureates. And while we don't specify that they would work on something very specific to the XRPL, but the interest and the excitement which they had, when they know what our plans are, we think a lot of students will be applying for these scholarships, and we think we'll have a lot of young talent, more talent coming into the XRPL ecosystem. We feel that grassroots efforts are very important. It's digital technology and this kind of blockchain for such as the XRPL is something which needs to last for generations to come. So without partnering with at the grassroots level with schools, which don't demand a formal education or a background in computer science, but they may not want to develop core code, but the application layers. We have so many different, we have APIs which make it so simple to interact with the XRPL. So from both businesses as well as people who want to get into code, and it's really heartwarming to know. I learned yesterday that they have students from the age of 18 to 62 who have registered in this, which means everybody's there. We had a perfect opportunity for the school to interact with our wonderful developers here. They came over, met them, and they had the head of partnerships came over, and he had wonderful discussions with all the developers who were here yesterday. And we'd like to expand this model to other countries, because without creating more devs, more business cases, more people who are not into core programming coming in to make create solutions, we won't get the reach, and we won't be able to meet our social vision of social and financial inclusion in all over the world. Law and finance is becoming more and more important because of regulation, as we've covered earlier. We'd like to self-regulate ourselves, right? We don't want to follow regulation. We don't want things to be thrust on us. We'd like to set the path. And I think the XRPL is in a unique position to do this, because from what we've seen in the presentations too, we are all really interested in making this work in conjunction with regulation, understanding what law is. It's quite a landscape right now, because different countries, so many things are there. So we think a whole new generation of lawyers will be required with a specific focus on fintech. We also through our partnerships, we get access to academics and people from other industries who also contribute to these universities. So they will make their resources available to the ecosystem. And that's really nice. We'd like to, Estonia is our first case. We are based here right now, but this is something which we're going to do within the next 12 months in many more countries. Again, protection of consumers. I've covered this many times, but because it's so important, it's paramount to us as a foundation. So we're beginning a formal vetting process for issuers on the XRPL. As many of you may have realized that there have been, over the last week or maybe a couple of weeks, there's been a whole plethora of tokens which are issued. Some good, some bad, some ugly, some great, right? So, but the consumer needs to know, the user needs to know what they're getting into, because you can't say it's buyer beware every time. So we're doing we're requisitioning through partnerships, detailed entity information for token issuers. We may publish a list, we will publish a list who have gone through those, that vetting process. Of course, people are free to choose what they want to choose, but we feel that if we have something of a list of including those who are issuing IOUs, which are backed, right? So we have a formal audit process where they presumably, if they're regulated, they have their audited things, which our auditors can just discuss with them. So we think overall, all these things will bring us to a much healthier and robust infrastructure, and a blockchain which will last and persist, on all fronts, and also make it more attractive for entities, governments, non-profits, charities, cooperatives, all of them to use it, as the XRPL is meant to be used. It's not a race car which should sit in a garage. So I think all these actions will help it go that way. We're filled with anticipation. And when the developers came here over the last 2 days, it was incredible. People have been working with each other for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and many of them had never met each other. But it didn't feel like that when we all met each other. It felt as if we've been seeing each other every day. So, but what we do find is that, the physical interaction, which has been very difficult over the last 2 years, hopefully things will change, is an important part of it. And everybody here has expressed the desire that, yes, they love the fact that we have a home for them. The XRPL office is not for us. It's for the ecosystem. So everybody treats it as their own. They can come here for a day, they can come here for a week, they can come here for a month. We'd love it, and we'll provide them all the support for it. Going forward, we'll have more meetings, and we'll do it across the world. We understand that people can't travel, and so we go to them, right? It's not fair to expect everybody to come to us. That ends my brief talk. Thank you all for attending Apex. I think it's been a wonderful gathering. It's been a long 2 years since people have been able to meet each other, and I hope we have more events like this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharath. That was such a great way to kick off the day and hear about all the exciting developments over at the XRP Ledger Foundation. Next up, I'm incredibly excited to introduce David Schwartz, who's the CTO at Ripple and the co-creator of the XRP Ledger. Jazz and I were just talking backstage that David's one of those people, every time you hear him speak, you learn something new. And today, David will walk us through the continued evolution of the XRP Ledger. He'll start with his original vision and then highlight some recent technical updates before sharing new features. David, welcome.
Thank you. It is fantastic to be here. It really is just wonderful. Oh. Yeah. Sorry, I thought the teleprompter was gonna run. I'm gonna talk about XRP Ledger innovations today. The talk. Usually I do a slide-driven talk, and this talk is more just freely driven. But there was a script that was supposed to keep me on, that was supposed to be loaded into teleprompter. And it looks like it's not there. So I guess this talk is going to have to be a little bit more freewheeling than I expected. It's a little less technical and a little more historical. I'm going to talk about XRP Ledger innovations, but first I want to talk about what this experience has been, I think, for me and for all of us. I first became involved in the cryptocurrency space back in 2011 when I found Bitcoin. And it was right about that time that the first cracks were appearing in the proof of work narrative. I think a lot of people at that time had this view that I think we would consider naive today, that proof of work would just be a sort of decentralizing force, that proof of work was the secret sauce behind Bitcoin, the thing that made it different, the thing that made it better. And the crack in that narrative, and it's obvious today, is that there are people who have cheaper power than other people, and there are people who have access to better ASICs than other people, and that it just can't be that sort of liberating, decentralizing force that I think we all thought it was. And that's why we started working on a different way of coming to consensus, a different method. And we developed Federated Byzantine Agreement, which is the method that powers the XRP Ledger, leads to its reduced energy consumption, and gives it some of the properties that it has, the speed and the consistency. You just heard Bharath talking about the XRP Ledger Foundation, which launched about a year ago. They just recently published their own XRP Ledger UNL, which we're fantastically excited about. Coil also publishes an XRP Ledger UNL. You probably heard the announcement of hooks. We hear a lot about people who want smart contracts, people who want DeFi features on the XRP Ledger. And today, most of those projects typically use Ethereum. Ethereum is a more general purpose blockchain than the XRP Ledger is. You can do anything on Ethereum. The question is, can you do anything well? The problem is that because it is so general purpose, it tends to have high fees, and especially unpredictable fees, by which I mean the fee might be low one day and high the next day. Hooks is designed based on the XRP ledger philosophy. It's fixed function in the sense that it's not Turing complete. You can't do anything with hooks. There are things you can do on Ethereum that you can't do on hooks, but there's a lot of things that you can do on hooks. And because it's designed based on that sort of more limited function philosophy, it shouldn't produce the kind of performance problems and fee problems that Ethereum's implementation produces. It's much more efficient and adds smart contract-like capabilities to the XRPL where the ledger can respond to a payment in a decentralized way. XLS 14 was recently proposed, I think by Weezy Wind. It's a standard to issue NFTs on the XRP ledger. I think he would agree that it's not a great standard, it's a good standard. It's kind of like colored coins on Bitcoin. Bitcoin was never designed to support any token other than Bitcoin. And colored coins is kind of a little bit of a hack to make Bitcoin support other types of coins. But Bitcoin support for other coins didn't really take off very much. Other blockchains took on that role because they were more optimized for them. XLS 14 allows the XRP ledger to support NFTs, but it is a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. The great thing about it was it just works. You can use it today. And I'll talk a little bit more later about efforts that are going on now to provide something better than what XLS 14 gives you. Negative UNL is a feature that I am incredibly excited about, but it's very difficult for me to convey that excitement without, it's a little bit bittersweet. It's kind of like if you invented a technology that would make it less likely for a nuclear reactor to melt down. Like, how would the nuclear reactor industry promote that development, right? They would have to talk about how horrible meltdowns are to tell you how great the technology is. And of course, they don't want to do that, right? Nobody in the nuclear reactor industry wants to talk about how bad a meltdown is. They want to pretend that they don't exist. But let's be honest, blockchains have failure modes. Bitcoin, for example, has a double spend. Bitcoin had an unintentional fork in 2013. Ethereum had the DAO attack. There are residual failure modes in blockchains, and I think it is important that we continue to innovate to reduce the odds of them happening and reduce their severity, even if it is a bit embarrassing for the industry to point the finger at these failure modes. And there is a residual failure mode in the XRP ledger, which is if too many validators fail before humans can respond to it, the ledger could halt its forward progress. That is a residual failure mode. It's somewhat analogous to the double spend risk or reorganization risk in Bitcoin. The consequences tend to be less. They tend to be a halting of the ledger. So nobody loses money directly, but you want maximum reliability for ledger. You don't want it to halt. So the way the negative UNL feature works, and I think this is important, is it does not change consensus at all. This is something very important to understand. So it has no impact on any of the XRP ledger's attributes that come from consensus. That includes its censorship resistance, and that includes its sort of decentralization, its fairness, amendment voting, fee voting, the other things that validators do. Negative UNL is implemented exclusively through the validation mechanism. To use a Bitcoin analogy for people not familiar with the sort of technical details of the XRP ledger, if you think about like Bitcoin's decentralization and fairness properties, they come from the mining and the production of blocks. But the final validation, like the resistance to reorganizations, comes from each individual participant's decision when to consider a transaction final. They may wait for 6 confirmations. Negative UNL impacts the part of the XRP ledger that's analogous to waiting for confirmations. And that is not where the decentralization or censorship resistance comes from, because those are exclusively local properties, right? It's a local decision when to accept a transaction. We're decarbonizing the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger is the first blockchain to be fully decarbonized. You're never going to see that happen for proof of work blockchains. I kind of have a hard time convincing people that we're serious about this sometimes. One of the arguments that they make is like, well, people, you know, they fly around in private jets, so do they really care about decarbonizing the XRP ledger? Yes, we're serious. Yes, we do really care. And I'll make an argument that I hate that I have to make this, but I think it's worth making, that even if you aren't serious about the, climate change, and even if you aren't serious about saving the planet, and even if you think that there's hypocrisy in, wealthy countries, people in wealthy countries talking about decarbonization, don't forget that the costs of proof of work are borne by the user of the system. When you use Bitcoin or when you use Ethereum, your transaction fees are going to miners who then pay them to electric companies and ASIC manufacturers. So you should, even just as a selfish user of that blockchain, you should care. And I'm sure many of you have heard the narrative that Ethereum's fees mean that it's very useful, it's very popular, like that people are paying a lot of fees for it. But it's important to keep in mind that fees are residual friction that have not been removed by the system. So I'll use a bit of an analogy. If you think about eBay, eBay removes friction between buyers and sellers. If I'm selling something and you want to buy it, if we could find each other directly and we had a payment system and a reputation system that we could use, we wouldn't use eBay. We'd save a lot of money. You don't use eBay to sell something to your neighbors. But you do use eBay because it removes friction in cases where those direct sales are not possible. And it's easy to say that the more money eBay makes, well, the more friction they must be removing. But just remember, every dollar that eBay makes is a dollar that a buyer spent and that a seller didn't get. It's residual friction. If you're a user of eBay, you want them to make as little money as possible because that money is either leaving your pocket or not going into your pocket. So it is the users of systems like Ethereum who are paying those fees. If you use Ethereum, you're paying for its energy consumption. And I think also it's become clear that proof of work does not deliver on some of the promises that we thought it would deliver. It is not a decentralizing force. It just doesn't. Bitcoin's decentralization comes from the fact that the transaction data is public. Bitcoin's decentralization comes from the fact that everybody knows how every transaction is supposed to work and everybody knows the consequences of every transaction. It doesn't come from how it solves the double spend problem. Light accounts are a feature that's been proposed to lower the XRP Ledger account reserve requirements. Many of you probably know that the XRP Ledger reserve requirements recently dropped from 20 XRP to 10 XRP by validator vote and sort of by community demand. The reason for the account reserve is that an account on the XRP Ledger is a real thing. It's different from a Bitcoin receiving address. When you have a receiving address in Bitcoin, that receiving address isn't really represented in the system. There's no account that it represents. There's sort of a collection of funds. Each chunk of funds, as far as Bitcoin is concerned, sort of has an independent life. The XRP Ledger works more like Ethereum now does. You have an account that has a balance and that has parameters you can set. And that gives you some capabilities that are not possible on other blockchains. Like, for example, let's say you're a charity and you give out a receiving address in Bitcoin. And maybe you're not very sophisticated in Bitcoin, so you've hired some firm to take your Bitcoin receipts and convert them into your local currency. They have the key to your receiving address. They have to in order to make that work. And if you want to change that to a company, or maybe you want to self-custody, or you want to hold on to Bitcoin, you want to HODL instead of selling as you receive, you need to change your receiving address to a new one that previous party that you contracted with doesn't know the key to. And that's very painful. XRP Ledger accounts are real things. They have properties that you can change, including things like the key that signs them. So you can actually change the key on the account. You can rekey the account without having to create a new account. But that associates a cost with an account on the XRP Ledger that most other blockchains don't have. And to mitigate that cost, there's a reserve, which is not really a fee you pay, but it's a balance that you have to have. And if you have that balance, you can create an account. Light accounts require a smaller reserve. And the way they do that is kind of interesting. Most accounts pay the reserve, but they don't use any of the features that the reserve sort of covers the cost of. Because those features are free once you have an account, you kind of have to pay for them up front. Otherwise, a malicious party could create a large number of accounts that use all of those features, and they could use a lot of ledger space at very low cost. Light accounts are limited in function. They can't do all of the things that full function accounts can do. But they can receive and hold XRP, they can transfer it, they can make payments. And they have a much lower reserve. In the current proposal, their reserve would be 1 XRP, which is 1/10 of the current XRP, the current reserve for a full account. I think a lot of people have said that the reserve is an obstacle to adoption of the XRP Ledger, the fact that you have to have 10 XRP. Maybe for most of the people in this room, it's not a big obstacle, but if you think about trying to drive more mass adoption, particularly in countries that are not as wealthy, it is a big obstacle. And also just having money that's yours that you can't access like ever is just, it's not a great user experience. So let's look ahead at the future of the XRP Ledger and where we're going. I think today we're going to announce the first release of federated sidechains. Federated sidechains are not a new concept. There are federated sidechains out there, but the way we've implemented them for the XRP Ledger is a little bit different. A federated sidechain can be based on any technology. It can be based on the XRP ledger technology, or it can be different. I think it's most interesting where it uses the XRP ledger's consensus algorithms. But it can have completely different transaction semantics. One of the first applications of federated sidechains will probably be Ethereum virtual machine chains. That is a sidechain that implements the Ethereum virtual machine, but that can move tokens to and from the XRP ledger. So what makes them federated is that ability to move tokens. They're operated by a federation. I'm sure most of you have seen Star Trek. You know what a federation is, right? It's a group of entities that are distinct and don't necessarily completely trust each other, but they cooperate to achieve some objective that they couldn't achieve as easily on their own, or couldn't achieve it all on their own. And they have well-defined roles for the federation versus the roles for the individual participant. And that's what federated sidechains do. And they use that federation to move tokens onto and off of the federated sidechain. I expect that federated sidechains will make available new applications that have not been previously possible for the XRP ledger, and a big one is going to be more powerful DeFi. We have a decentralized exchange built into the XRP ledger. We had the first decentralized exchange probably late 2012. But that's about there were not the full DeFi functions that you could get from an Ethereum virtual machine sidechain or a sidechain more tuned towards DeFi features. I think another important thing is horizontal scalability. Blockchains fundamentally have transaction limits. I hesitate to say never, but I think it's the one thing that we don't have a really good plan to solve anywhere in this industry is scalability. I've pitched blockchains for applications where many people would never use a blockchain, but the one thing that I come back to is that, like, if throughput and transactions per second is your driving metric, it's very difficult to choose a blockchain technology because we haven't figured out how to scale them yet. And horizontal scalability is one way to do that. So the idea is this. Let's say you have a chain that has some huge capacity, 10,000 transactions per second, but you still want more than that. If you can horizontally create 100 such chains, and you can do 2-hop transactions, well, now your transaction throughput has gone way up. Yes, you need 2 transactions instead of 1, but you have the transaction capacity of all of these chains added together. So that horizontal scalability is big. And I think another important thing is the way that this is going to inspire developers. Developers will be able to innovate right at the blockchain layer. So when you build on top of Ethereum, you get a lot of things from the Ethereum ecosystem, right? You don't have to worry about transaction formats. You don't have to worry about transaction execution rules. You don't have to worry. You have access to ERC20 tokens. You can interoperate with the rest of the ecosystem. But you pay a heavy price for that. You're stuck with Ethereum's fee model. You're stuck with the Ethereum virtual machine. You're stuck with the storage that Ethereum gives you, and you're stuck with its costs. And if that's a good deal for you, then you should build on Ethereum. But if it's not, and for many people it's not, especially where transaction fees, are in over $100 in many cases, a better set of trade-offs is necessary. And the way to make those trade-offs however you want is to innovate at that very lowest layer, to essentially build your own blockchain. And you can think of federated sidechains as a toolkit for building your own blockchain. And that will allow people to innovate right at those lowest layers. Another thing that you can do is you can use it as a sort of test lab. Let's say there's some feature, hooks might be a good example, that you think should be adopted on the XRP ledger. Well, you have to implement it. And you kind of have to convince people that it works and that it won't do harm. And it's very difficult to do that if you can't handle real money with it. You can build a blockchain as a test. You can build a sort of a quarantine network, an experimental network, and people are not motivated to attack it. They're not going to bother focusing resources on it because there's no money to be had. If you first handle real money, and it's billions of dollars, I think we've all seen some of the disasters in the industry with projects that scaled up to huge amounts of money before they had the technical wherewithal to be able to handle those amounts. I think it's responsible what Flare did, where they built Songbird, and Songbird is handling real money, but it's not sort of their live network. It's like an experimental and test network where you can sort of fail more gracefully. But if it succeeds, then Flare will launch with much more confidence. And this is kind of the same idea. You can build a federated sidechain with some feature that you want to propose for inclusion in the XRP ledger, and you can handle real money with it. You don't have to. But you have a switch that you can flip whenever you're ready to handle real money. And then when you're arguing that that feature should be included in the XRP ledger, you have something that you can show that the feature it's not going to make the validators crash. It's not going to slow the network down. It's not going to blow up the fees exponentially. It's not going to eat up memory or CPU. It's going to work. You've proven that it's worked, and you've proven that it can withstand a hostile attack because it's handling real money. And I think that's going to excite developers in much the same way that Ethereum did. This idea that we can innovate not on top of a whole bunch of technical decisions that have already made for us that are irrevocable and that limit us, but in an environment where we can experiment with changing those very bottom technical decisions. So, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, David, a real rock star in our industry. So I'm sure everybody enjoyed listening to everything you had to say. Up next, Christopher Jimison is the CTO of Forte. He will discuss how Forte is doing some incredible work in the tokenization space within gaming.
Hey guys, well thanks so much. I know it's been a great Apex so far, and hopefully everybody's not a little too hungover from last night's party, but we'll get into it with how Forte is trying to unlock token economics, and we're really focusing on games. So I like to think about this as, you can imagine a classroom, the teacher goes and says, hey kids, let's build a game. What do you want to work on? And everybody gets super excited, and they're saying graphics and gameplay and animation. And then over to the side corner, we have two kids that are like, well, what's left? Economics and payments. Thus begins the ballad of Alice and Bob and how they became the primary actors in every single transaction documentation you read in crypto. But really, economics and payments has a very large impact into game design. So when you kind of look at the history of games, especially from the perspective of payments, you can see that they're really tied into how games are made and what the game actually is. So if you go back into the 1980s, what we saw was arcades were the major game consumption mechanism. And these games were actually built so that arcade operators would buy them and then monetize to their players for 25 cents for like a 2-minute game session. And this was to allow them to kind of cycle through their players. Moving into the 90s, what we see is consoles became a big thing, and they're able to deliver this experience at home. But more importantly, the game design changed because, or not just because, but one of the factors is that you're now paying $50 for what is basically 10 hours of gameplay. But the game now can facilitate richer stories, RPGs, strategy games became a really big component of this. As we move into the 2000s, online payments became very accessible, both to the developers as well as the users themselves. So now I can enter in my credit card information, I can have a monthly bill being charged from like $10 to $15, but the game can now access and have new content, communities, a lot of exciting features that they don't have to worry about. Did I get the check mailed to me this month? Do I need to turn off this player's account? They could just do an automatic bill. The 2010 times, we really started to see mobile explode. But the same is true on PCs with products like Steam, where you create an account, you register your credit card, and then inside the game experience, you could be billed and charged for different items. You didn't have to leave the game experience anymore. It was all baked into a nice product that was easily accessible for the users. Now, Forte's position is, into the 2020s, we feel like Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, but cryptocurrencies is going to be the major mechanism for a lot of these new types of games. But what those game designs are, hey, we're not really sure yet. But that's also what makes this so exciting. But one of the big things is that payment channels need to meet users' expectations. If you look at what the current user is kind of dealing with now, it's, hey, I set up my phone, I added my credit card to it, I go to the store, find a cool game, maybe I pay for it, maybe it's free, download it, I'm playing the game, there's some cool item I want to buy, Transaction done, I'm happy, and I'm getting right into the action. But if you look at a lot of the crypto models, there's just a lot of barriers to entry. The first thing you're going to have to do, well, if I've never even heard of crypto before, I now have to go out and create a wallet, learn about what a wallet even is. Okay, I got my wallet, I have to fund my wallet. That typically means going to exchange, entering KYC information, doing an ACH transfer. Okay, great, I finally got through that part. I'm ready to actually buy something in this game. Well, I'm now going to have to scan a QR code, copy and paste maybe an address, and then figure out this whole gas thing. What is gas? I don't know. So all this just adds friction upon friction upon friction for a user base that isn't necessarily crypto savvy. And then the worst thing is after they make this payment, gone through all this hassle, especially if you're on some other blockchains, it could be a very long wait time where they're used to things finalizing in seconds. We're now talking minutes or more. So what Forte is really focused on is building out an end-to-end solution to enable enterprises to easily build and scale massive token economics in games. Well, what does that mean? Well, we really look at it as a kind of a multi-phased approach, but the first is to really start to provide that seamless UI. We need to have liquidity for these players so that they can feel like as they're putting currency into the game, they can take it out, and it becomes a very fluid motion for them. But also compliance is a very heavy aspect to this. So the first thing that we kind of look at is embeddable game wallets. How do we get the crypto experience to be similar to what the player's expectations are? Jump into the game, be able to access it, but then still manage that regulation where I can buy items, I can build up currency, but then also we can handle KYC and other things as these values continue to grow. Additionally, economics in games are an art, not a science. There's so many factors into what causes your game to have a strong economy inside of it. It could be the balancing, the tuning of the assets. It could be the price points you have. It could be just a general gameplay of how often do you use this item and what can you do with it in the game. So all that reflects that developers need time from when they first launch the product, get it into the hands of these players, and then really figure out how to tune it to make it the most fun experience. So we really focus on how do they have that opportunity to soft launch their game, seed their economy, but then roll it out into more public blockchains. Additionally, one of the big pieces that we like to think about is what we call the network effects flywheel. And while I'm not going to read this whole slide to everybody, but I like to kind of give a general example of how this can work using a real-world scenario. So if you think about COVID times, a lot of us took up hobbies. This hobby could have been knitting, for example. So I'm knitting some sweaters, some socks, some hats. I'm doing all this stuff. And I have a whole catalog of items that I've learned how to do. And I'm like, I really don't want to keep this junk in my house. I want to get rid of it. What do? Well, I can go to Etsy, and then I could sell these items on Etsy, and all of a sudden, my hobby, my form of relaxation or entertainment just became a revenue-generating source for me as a player. This same example can be applied into the digital game space as well. For example, I might be a player, I go to the marketplace, I buy some sword, I make my payment for it, the developer gets a cut of that, and I go out on my adventure. And in the course of my adventure, maybe I slay the evil dragon. And in doing so, my sword becomes Excalibur, this really important, critical thing because not everybody sees the evil dragon, but it affects both its stats, its interest for the player base. It could be a item of real acquisition. And I could say, you know what? I'm going to take it back to the marketplace, put it up for sale, and maybe I get $100 for it. So that's a turn in the flywheel because my activities, my time increase the value of this item. The developer wins because they now get a percentage of the cut for that sale. And then the purchaser wins because they didn't have to go out and spend like 2 days running around in the forest trying to find a dragon. But this same, that's just one turn in the wheel. The wheel can continue to be expanded upon and grown. So imagine the developer now has a tournament where you can pay money, win this tournament, and get more money out of it. But you have more than just that one single activity. You now have the ability to say, well, great, I'm a championship winner. What if I have a jobs board in my game that I can advertise 50 coins for half an hour, and I'll come play this game with you. The person who just sold that Excalibur, they can now hire this person to teach them how to play the game better. This is how Forte is trying to help games not just become successful crypto economies, but also they can become platforms and revenue generation systems for both the developers and the players themselves. So really all this is to say is that as we all talk about the hype of NFTs, how cool they are, how expensive they are, it's just the beginning. It's the surface layer. Replacing your payment rails with crypto is just the start. It needs to get much deeper into the game to really unlock that massive potential. So really how XRPL helps us excel, well, we use a kind of a whole suite of Ripple products. Whether it's the ledger that gives us low-cost transactions, fast finality, and really just simple and easy to use APIs. This is great for us from a developer perspective. ILP, we use quite a bit to achieve packetized payments, settlement systems to help reduce the cost. But finally, there's PayString. And PayString is great because it really starts to get back to that initial argument, which is meeting user expectations, having identity assigned as compared to an address, a crypto address. I'm now Chris at Forte.io. So yeah, that's my talk. I just want to say thanks so much for listening to me. I hope everybody had a fantastic Apex, and look forward to seeing you all later.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was great. And I believe David's going to come back up and join us for a few more remarks. Thanks, David.
It occurred to me, I didn't tell any jokes. Not one. I am known for always starting my presentation with a joke. I always do that. I didn't do it. People don't always laugh at them, but I always do. And when Monica told me that we were going to have this crypto developer conference in Las Vegas, I said, Las Vegas? Finally, something in Las Vegas that caters to people who aren't bad at math. Hey, all right, I tried. Okay, I tried. All right, try another one. I have a strong personal connection to Las Vegas. When I was a kid, my parents went to Las Vegas for the weekend. They drove to Las Vegas in a $16,000 Toyota Tercel, and they came back in a shiny, brand new, $250,000 Greyhound bus. All right, maybe not the right audience. While I'm up here, I want to talk about two things that I didn't talk about before. I want to talk a little bit more about NFTs. We hear from just about everybody that they want an NFT strategy. A lot of people aren't sure exactly what they want it for, but they know they want it, and there are a lot of people who do know exactly what they want it for. They're all in. They're bought in. They're going big on them. The XRP ledger has some features that will make it fantastic for NFTs. So you have low transaction cost, you have high confirmation speed, and you have a sort of lightweight ledger design. The design of the XRP ledger's internal database is it's just really good for NFTs. We put forward a proposal, 3 people at Ripple, for an NFT standard on the XRP ledger that's built for scale and for volume. We think we're going to see broad adoption of that standard, and that's going to power new use cases into the future. I don't think we know exactly what those NFT use cases are going to be at. I think some of them are obvious. Gaming is obvious. Collectibles is obvious. But I think there's a sort of entire universe of NFT applications that people don't really see yet that are going to be very, very big. If you think about it, we all sort of own lots of digital rights. There's all kinds of digital rights that you own. You own digital rights to movies, to video games, to objects in games. And I think it's not just the obvious ones, like the mass market ones, like movies and songs. Your right to that song or that movie could be an NFT that you could take with you from market to market. So this is an extremely exciting area. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is automated market making. As I mentioned before, the XRP ledger is the OG DEX. We had a DEX in 2012. We have cross-currency payments. We have issued assets. We built the XRP ledger. We designed it, and other people have extended it with the payments use case in mind. And that payment use case is a cross-currency payment world. It's a world where some people like dollars, some people like euros, some people like Bitcoin, some people like XRP. It's a multi-token world. It's a tokenized world where maybe other types of assets are tokenized. And liquidity is sort of the secret sauce to making that work. I think personally my earliest vision that I think has held for 10 years now was this idea of sort of public pools of liquidity. In existing payment systems, you're stuck with that payment system's liquidity. If you use Western Union, you get their cash in, you get their cash out, you get their liquidity, whether you like it or not, and you can't unbundle those things. That early vision was these pools of liquidity that everybody can contribute to and everybody can draw off that are kind of unbundled from the payment system or the asset that you're using to pay with. Automated market makers, I think, will help improve that liquidity because they can capture a long tail of assets better than technologies like order books can. We've been working with the community on an automated market maker implementation for the XRP ledger. And today, for the first time, I think I'm going to let the world know that it has a mechanism that I don't believe exists in any other automated market maker design in the world that allows the stakers, the people who put the liquidity into the automated market maker, to command a larger share of the profits that would normally go to arbitrageurs, increasing the return. I do want to talk about why I think that the XRP ledger is uniquely suited to exploit that type of technology. Automated market makers have lose profit to arbitrageurs. Essentially, as the price of assets change, the market maker doesn't know that the price is different, and so it sort of makes trades at a loss. Arbitrageurs make those trades at a loss to sort of rebalance the AMM, causing what is sometimes called impermanent loss. Although whether or not it's impermanent is up for debate. Now, there are certain mechanisms that maximize the penalty that causes, and there are certain mechanisms that minimize them. And the XRP ledger has three factors that weren't intended for automated market makers. They were intended for payments, but they significantly improve the efficiency of automated market makers and increase the return. And one of those is speed. If you're arbitraging against an automated market maker, you don't know the state of the ledger at the time your transaction executes. You only know the state of the ledger at the time you create your transaction. So you have this latency period during which the price could change or the ledger state could change. With Ethereum, that could be several minutes. With the XRP ledger, that's typically just a couple of seconds. So that's a significant sort of inherent feature of the XRP ledger that makes arbitrageurs arbitrage more efficiently, and the earlier and the quicker an arbitrager arbitrages, the less loss the pool suffers. If an arbitrager waits until the profits are large, that means the losses are big, right? You want an arbitrager to arbitrage as soon as there's an arbitrage opportunity, which is the second feature. If it cost you $50 to arbitrage on Ethereum and less than a penny to arbitrage on the XRP ledger, you're going to make your arbitrage transaction more quickly. You're not going to wait until the potential profit is enormous, and therefore the potential loss to the pool is also enormous. So the fact that the XRP ledger fees are lower is going to mean more of that money that would go to arbitrageurs stays with the people who are staking the pool. And that's what you want, because if people don't stake the pool, there's no liquidity. You want the stakers to reap the rewards of their staking so that there will be these deep pools of liquidity. And the third feature is fairness. How many of you here know what MEV is? No hands, okay, well, one or two. Okay, I'll get a couple over there. I think those might be Ripple employees. But MEV is what Ethereum miners do sometimes, and they have no choice. Mining is cutthroat. If I can make more money mining than you can, I'm going to grow my mining operation. I'm going to put you out of business by raising the difficulty. If you can make extra money mining, you pretty much have to. You have no choice. You have to do it, because otherwise you'll go out of business. And one of the ways that miners can make more money is by gaming automated market makers and decentralized exchanges. They essentially front run. They say, oh, I'm not going to execute this transaction, and I'm not going to execute this transaction, but oh, I am going to execute this transaction even though it paid a low fee, because if I put my own transaction in front of it, I can make a profit. Most of those profits are user losses. To some extent, this part of it is to some extent a zero-sum game, right? A front runner who makes money from a trader is taking money out of the trader's pocket. And you can't do that on the XRP ledger because the Federated Byzantine Agreement algorithm doesn't have there's no miner, there's no one sort of dictator of the moment who gets to decide what goes in the block. And so those three features of the XRP ledger that it's had, forever, make automated market makers work much, much better. And then with the mechanism that we're working on that will allow them, the pool, to recapture much of the profits that the arbitrage makes, almost as if the pool were arbitraging against itself, we're hopeful that that will incentivize very, very deep pools of liquidity on the XRP ledger that will make movement between tokens very efficient. So that could be, I think that could be a game changer. I also want to talk a little bit about bridges. The entire crypto industry is building toward a multi-chain future where every network is optimized for a specific use case. The XRP ledger was built for payments. Ethereum was optimized for smart contracts and sort of it can do anything, and that's why a lot of DeFi is built on ETH to this day. More exchanges are looking to DeFi to create interoperable experiences for their users, to alleviate network congestion, and the ability to operate crypto across networks has become increasingly critical. I think you could even imagine NFTs that could move between blockchains. I think we already have like NFT bridges. You have a premium NFT that lives on Ethereum. You know, people think, well, Ethereum is the premium blockchain right now, but you could move it on other blockchains, and then someone can sort of move it back and then reclaim it on Ethereum. And you can have this world where that NFT can transact rapidly at low speed. You can have auctions and other features. You don't have to pay $35 to $100 in gas. Meanwhile, the sort of real NFT is on Ethereum. So bridges are not just for tokens, for fungible tokens. They're not just for money. They're really for almost any asset that can live on a ledger. And that will allow networks with complementary use cases to work together to solve much more complex solutions. I think I mentioned earlier that we're announcing the first release of the federated sidechain feature today. So developers will be able to more easily build bridges to other currencies that will allow this sort of combined world where you can transact on the blockchain that's best for my use case, you can transact on the blockchain that's best for your use case, and we can interoperate. All right, more jokes? Well, no, I think not. They told me I'd get fired if I told, in fact, I'll tell you, I ran one joke by a couple of people, and they said, I'm not joking, they said, Monica will literally run up there and stab you. So if you want to see that joke, come see me privately. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I love an encore moment, and I'm definitely going to need to hear that joke later. In the meantime, we're going to take a quick networking break, so feel free to grab some coffee, stretch your legs, and we'll be back here at 10:45 Pacific.